Thank you, Marty, and hello, everyone. It's really good to be back with all of you again for another terrific webinar. This one looks like it's going to be really promising. Before we jump into the webinar, let me just say a quick word about Wallace Center. The Wallace Center at Winrock International has been a leading organization in the movement for a more sustainable and equitable food system for over 25 years. Today, the center supports entrepreneurs and communities as they build a new 21st century food system that's healthier for people, the environment, and the economy. The center serves a growing community of civic, business, and philanthropic organizations involving a new good food system in the United States. In particular, we're focused on advancing regional, collaborative efforts around the country to move good food, healthy, green, fair, and affordable food, beyond direct marketing realm into the larger scale wholesale channels. As Marty's explained, the NGFN is a key initiative of the Wallace Center, and you can see the connection between the two. The NGFN webinars, like this one, are designed to be a technical assistance platform that offers expertise, innovation, and experience from various regions of the country. So with that, let me introduce you to today's presenters. Karen Karp is a respected entrepreneur, project manager, and food business consultant. She's founded Karp Resources, a food and agriculture consultancy, in 1990. As president of the company, she brings over 25 years of specialty food retail, agriculture, and restaurant experience. Karen holds a bachelor's degree in fine arts from the Parsons School of Design and a master's degree from the University of Bath School of Management's Responsibility and Business Practice program. Winning honors in her thesis, How Does Food Sustain Us?, Ms. Karp co-wrote the curriculum in culinary entrepreneurship for Mississippi University of Women, now a minor degree at the university, as well as the book Gourmet to Go, a guide to owning and operating a specialty food store. Not only that, there's more, folks. Ms. Karp was a winner of the 2008 Enterprising Women Award, serves as the Director of Business Innovation for the Sustainable Food Lab, is a member of the Women Presidents Organization, and sits on the board of the Food Alliance. On a more personal note, Ms. Karp farms oysters near her home in Southland, New York City. In addition to that rather scripted, let me just say personally, over the last couple of years I've had a chance to work with Karen, and it's been a real pleasure. She's really dynamite and has a lot of great experience and insights, as you're going to find out today, so we're extremely pleased to have her with us today. Not only that, she's brought along two of her rising stars as well, so we're excited to have them as well. Let me introduce you to Shauna Cohen, who is Grow New York City's wholesale market specialist, working to strategically grow the wholesale green market, New York City's only dedicated marketplace for wholesale trade and locally produced foods. Previously, she was a senior consultant with Karp Resources. She was a researcher on the Wholesale Farmers Market Feasibility Study team and a project leader for New York City school foods local food procurement efforts. Just on a side note there, Grow New York City is a HUFED grant recipient this year, so we're excited to have them on the call and excited to be able to invest in their success. In addition, the Grow New York City is going to be profiled in the NGFN's coming newsletter, which is either out today or out very, very soon. Jeff will say a little bit more about that at the end. In addition, today we have Emily Sandusky, who's a consultant with Karp Resources, and she's joined Karp Resources in 2008. Her focus areas include market research and analysis, policy analysis and advising, evaluation, and support for Karp Resources' work with the New York City Green Cart Vendors and Good People Division. While at Karp Resources, she's completed a master's degree in urban policy at Milano, the New School for Urban Policy and Management, in 2009. There, she focused her studies on the New York City environmental and food policy. Her graduate work included a formal study and analysis of policies that impact the supply chains that bring regionally produced fruits and vegetables into New York City. Now that's a nice segue, because the only thing I want to say before Karen really outlines what she's going to talk about is that, picture trying to do this kind of work in as dense and as large and complicated regulatory and politically as a city as New York City. And you can find some newfound respect for these folks who are really trying to get something done in a pretty complicated environment. So my hat's off to them, and I'm really glad to have them here today. So with that, let me turn it over to Karen to take you through the rest of the presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you, John. I don't think I've ever had such an eloquent introduction, and I really appreciate being invited to participate on this webinar, to lead this webinar today with two of my rising stars, as you so accurately introduced both Shana and Emily. And thanks, Marty, to you for helping coordinate all the work that we do here in New York with the Good Food Network. Carp Resources, as John mentioned, is a food and agriculture consulting business that we founded in 1990. So we're 20 years old this year. And over the last 10 years, we've had a very strong focus in bridging the gap between local and regional ag supply and the New York City market. First 10 years, we really spent working different sorts of demands and needs and market structures, and for the last 10 years we've been really focusing on supply and now linking the two, demand and supply. This session was a little bit kind of co-designed in terms of the title, leveraging existing infrastructure. A lot of what the National Good Food Network works on is understanding what kind of infrastructure is necessary to build a good food supply in different regions around the country. And we do that work too. One of the things that we found, however, and it's become one of our company's approaches, is to really look within the infrastructure that exists today to see where new models, new initiatives, new incentives, new people, new ideas can be built into existing infrastructure. The photo on the right side of your screen is a photo of the Hunts Point Terminal Market here in New York City, the produce terminal market, which is the subject of much energy, much debate and much concern here in New York City. In effect, the Hunts Point Terminal Market could be considered our food hub in New York City, as about somewhere between $4 and $5 billion worth of fresh fruits and vegetables are shipped into and sold through that market every year. We're going to talk a little bit about the relationship of the Hunts Point Terminal Market to some of the other projects that are going on in the city. The agenda today, a little bit of introduction to who we are and what we do, how we got started in this with the project that John ability study. We'll talk about that a little bit more in solving. When we are looking to nurture and change the situation with food system infrastructure. And we're going to talk about lightly 3 case studies of projects that we either recently completed or are currently working on, which are listed here. We're going to summarize our infrastructure approach, and hopefully we will have time for questions and answers at the end.
Sorry about that. Carp Resources was established 20 years ago, and most of the things that we do focus on the following kinds of activities. We broker relationships and develop strategic solutions to food and organizational problems, mostly in the food and agriculture sector. We develop cutting-edge strategies for operational and marketing solutions, which means that we get in the ground and we're on the ground with our clients and with their partners working to solve the problems that they have in their food system work. And we build, most importantly, we build cross-sector programs among unlikely partners. People come to us to link manufacturers and farmers, community groups and corporations, developers and food educators, all who gain a lot of leverage by working together, but didn't really know how to make those connections and work together and speak the same language. So we consider ourselves significantly brokers of language and concepts. Okay, we have 2 divisions. One is what we call internally our Good Food is Good Business division, where we work specifically with food and agriculture initiatives in the public and private sectors, doing 4 specific things: strategic sourcing, feasibility analysis, market research, and business planning and evaluation services. About 4 years ago, we realized that a lot of the clients and projects that we've been supporting were doing really well with the concepts and the business models themselves, but they needed to have more effective people working within them. So we established a new division within the company, which we call Good People Are Good Business, that where we work with our clients to build leadership and organizational effectiveness through talent performance management, organizational assessment, capacity building, executive coaching, recruiting, and employee engagement services. I'll be honest with all of you on the call, we had absolutely no idea how that whole part of the business would go. It was just an instinct to say, you know, if we were doing all this great stuff with programs and businesses, people are really a very important engine. It's not just the food that needs to be good, the people need to be good. And I'm very happy to report that that part of our business is just really thriving after just 3.5 short years. So that's part of our own innovation. So we're considering infrastructure. Let's just get right into let's get right into the topic here. About in 2002, we found out about a study that the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets wanted to conduct to understand what the supply and demand were for local foods in the B2B sector, in the marketplace amongst businesses. So between farmers and institutions, between farmers and retailers, between farmers and restaurants, etc. What we had all been noticing here in New York City was that farmers and even some retailers were going to the green markets, filling up shopping carts, and as we say here in New York, schlepping bags and cases of produce halfway across the city on hand trucks, on trolleys, in shopping carts, on top of bicycles. And it was just apparently an incredibly ineffective way to get wholesale quantities of product from farmers into the places where they wanted to, where there was demand. So we conducted 2 rounds of research. The first research was to literally study supply and demand. What do the businesses in New York City want in terms of quality, quantities, and varieties of local foods? And on the flip side, what does the current marketplace really have to offer? And what we found, and this was 6 years ago, we completed the study in 2004. It was released in 2005. And in that project, which we did in partnership with an organization called Market Ventures, Inc. out of Portland, Maine, we determined that there was nearly $1 billion worth of demand for local food in the wholesale marketplace in New York City. $1 billion. It was $866 million, $1 billion. There was, at the time, 20% of that was in current available supply. So we knew that we had a lot of situations on our hands, a growing demand for local food, and where was the supply going to come from? Even though there was only 20% of the supply available, we identified in that study that there was an enormous potential supply, kind of pent-up supply, farmers that had not had their land in production for many, many years or several generations, lots of development kind of was keeping farmers considering whether they should stay in farming or not stay in farming. And really part of what our study did was illustrate to the agriculture community what kind of potential there was if more land and more technology were to be utilized to increase the local supply. So in that project, like in many others, we ask ourselves, what problem are we solving? You can advance the slide. Thanks, Emily. In the New York City Wholesale Farmers Market project, part of our work was to say, after we identified the supply and demand, was to say, okay, well, how should this product get into the marketplace? What kind of market is needed? And so we were retained for a second round of work where we did a business model and determined 2 sort of physical location ideas for the wholesale farmers to sell in New York City. One was a business model for a market outside of the Hunts Point Terminal Market, an independent market on another piece of land in the Hunts Point produce distribution zone of New York City. And the second model we did was for a model that would exist within the Hunts Point Terminal, Hunts Point Produce Terminal Market when the market would be rebuilt, which the city is negotiating right now. The City of New York and New York City Economic Development Corp. And the Hunts Point Produce Terminal Market are in negotiations right now about that rebuild. An interesting thing to note, this is a little part of New York City history that lots of people don't know, including some of the people in the New York City Economic Development Corp. The last time the Hunts Point Produce Terminal Market was rebuilt was in the mid-60s. I think 1967 it opened. And in that plan, which was written in the very early 60s, there was very clearly stated that the wholesale produce market would include a wholesale farmers market. And that farmers market never got built. So it never got built, and there's a lot of insights and history and kind of local lore as to why the wholesale farmers market never got built. What's really interesting is that between the mid-60s and the early 90s, what we saw was a kind of a decrease in interest in local foods, and then all of a sudden, starting again in the mid-70s, a huge interest in local foods. So that's one of the reasons why the wholesale farmers market idea becomes relevant again in 2000, in 2005 and 2010 as part of the Hunts Point terminal rebuild. So I'm just going to note a couple other projects that we worked on right after the Wholesale Farmers Market project, which all have a relationship to organizations thinking about infrastructure. In Tioga County, which is a small county in upstate New York, it's about 40 minutes west of Binghamton, if anybody knows upstate New York at all, and about a half-hour south of Ithaca. Tioga County is a very small county, mostly agricultural, mostly dairy and meat. And the type of dairy and meat that is produced in Tioga County is significantly sold into commodity chains. So farmers raise animals, they send them to slaughterhouses, the meat goes into commodity supply. The same with milk. And the Economic Development Department was faced with a very interesting situation in Tioga County. The picture we have here, it says North 15 and West 17. It also says West 86. Well, that interstate is brand new. And as an interstate was being planned by the U.S. Department of Transportation, part of what they do in planning an interstate is to plan what kind of industry is going to be supported by an interstate going through it. So Tioga County, the very sharp person in the Economic Development Department there, thought, how could this new interstate help uplift the agriculture economy of Tioga and the surrounding counties? And Tioga is a very small county, and so we actually ended up studying 5 counties in the area of upstate New York. And the project was to study a cooperative marketing and distribution concept for the agriculture producers in the region. The piece of infrastructure there in that project was twofold. One was the interstate. It was a piece of infrastructure that was being built. The second was what kind of local piece of infrastructure could support the farmers to sell into markets, and New York City was one of the targets, as was Philadelphia. Those are both cities that are relatively nearby to Tioga County. What kind of other infrastructure should the county consider building or establishing to support farmers to sell into these markets now that there is an interstate going forward? The uptake of that project was there wasn't a high interest at the time among the agriculture producers in the region. And again, this is like 5 years ago, so things could have really changed. But it was the farmers and the agriculture producers in that region in aggregate were not quite ready to think about direct marketing to cities like New York City and Philadelphia. On the right side of the screen, you see a picture of some kids learning how to farm in upstate New York. There is a catering company in New York City called Great Performances. It's the largest woman-owned catering business, I think, in the United States, and it is one of the largest independently owned catering businesses in New York City. And they wanted to make a differential for themselves as a catering company as the local food trend was growing and as their own interest in local supply was growing. And so they retained us to do a business plan for a farm, which they did, in fact, purchase and build and farm, and now they have a vertically integrated local food system in their catering company. One of the things that was very interesting for us to see was it's one thing to build the infrastructure to buy the farm and get the farmer and get everything up and running, but how does a catering company integrate organizationally the notion of having a farm? And over the first few years that they had the farm, there was almost a certain type of resistance is a little bit too strong a word, but there was a little bit of a, we don't know how this interfaces with our world among the salespeople in the catering company who didn't quite know how to sell their corporate clients the notion of a farm. And now, 5 years later, it is the thing they talk about all the time. It's the first thing they talk about when they get on the phone, and they want to say, do you know about our farm? So it went from being sort of an obscure, disenfranchised piece of the organization, the farm, to a very important part and a very value-added part of the organization. We know a lot about it because we share an office with Great Performances, and I personally sit next to their lead salesperson. So I hear her on the phone every day selling the farm, selling the product from the farm, not selling the farm. The next project I just want to touch on before we go into our case studies are 2 projects that we did in Louisville, Kentucky. The first project was actually the second project on your screen. We were asked to do a analysis of how the 10 to 16 counties surrounding Louisville could more directly support the growing interest in local foods in the city of Louisville. Now, the thing that's interesting about this project from my perspective, it is the city instigated a local food strategy. The city said, how can the region support us better? In New York City, we have a very different situation where we say, this countryside, it's very nice that we have this countryside and we really all love our local food, but we don't have any jurisdiction or policy or legislative power over the regions around us. So there's almost like a mentality difference between Louisville and New York City. Louisville feels very much a part of its surrounding counties as one big region, an economic region, whereas New York City is constantly having this struggle between the New York City region and the regions in the county surrounding and upstate New York. It's a little bit of a mentality thing. We were asked to look specifically at the need and the potential for a downtown retail farmers market at the beginning of the project. By the end of the project, we were looking at a number of other strategies, and where they landed was to retain, excuse me, recruit and retain somebody to be a public interest broker to continue to build the momentum between the producing counties and the consuming city in Louisville and Jefferson County. That project led us into a fun study. I just wanted to mention it because it's very unusual. Brown-Forman, which is a very large international spirits branding company, famous for Jack Daniels and a lot of other things, looked at their Fetzer wine line and said, you know, we do this great sustainable agriculture work in wine. What could we do with spirits that might have the same kind of market cachet? And so we did. It was a very small, very contained project, but it was really fun to sort of help Brown-Forman think through what a sustainable bourbon would look like, and working in a regional agriculture marketplace where they are essentially a global commodities purchaser for the products that they distill. So it was a little bit like, how does a big global corporation look regionally to create a differentiated product? How do you use the stills? How do you use the plants? What kind of bottles do you use, et cetera, et cetera? So that was the infrastructure there was a distillery and a bottling plant and distribution systems. That was the infrastructure that was looked at to ask the question, how could we have a more sustainable product in our, in our offerings? So the problems that we're solving, every one of those problems was an infrastructure problem, although people didn't see them necessarily as an infrastructure problem. We understood that there was a linchpin in each of those projects which had to do with something that was quite tangible as a piece of infrastructure. But the ideas that were surrounding it, the clients came to us with another kind of problem that actually was resolved or researched through the lens of infrastructure. So we're going to do 3 case studies here. The first case study is a project that we're working on now with a company called C.H. Robinson Worldwide, which is an international third-party logistics firm. In the United States, the main thing they do is ship produce. About 400 million cases of produce are shipped around the United States every year. And C.H. Robinson's customers are large retailers, big box stores, Walmart, small regional grocery chains, medium regional grocery chains, but most particularly the retail sector, although some food service as well. We've known about and been supporting C.H. Robinson's sustainability strategies through the work that Carp Resources does with the Sustainable Food Lab, and through the national office and through the folks there that are working on procurement and sustainability. We got to be introduced to their Northeast Regional Sourcing Office, which was mandated to begin a very specific, very targeted, excuse me, regional food procurement strategy. So what have we done with C.H. Robinson? Well, we just completed the first year of our work with them in New York State. Specifically, we were asked to look at New York State and help identify potential suppliers that could feed into their system. The infrastructure that we had to work with is a company that has logistics expertise. If you want to move a truckload of anything around the country, this is the company that you call. There's probably very few companies that do it as expertly as they do. They do conventional distribution. I mean, nothing is, the trucks look exactly like that truck. They're not branded. You just never know when C.H. Robinson is behind a truckload of product that's going from A to B. What C.H. Robinson focuses on, what their expertise is scale. The other thing that they really focus on, and their expertise is in adding value to the links along the chain by providing technical support such as food safety help, help with purchasing fuel, all sorts of kind of back of the house, back office value add to their customers. So New York State, we know New York State through the work that we've done with the Wholesale Farmers Market Project and the other projects I've mentioned, and we're going to talk a little bit about school food at the end of this call. One of the things we know about farmers in upstate New York is that they're very productive. They know their markets. They know the markets that they have. They like the markets that they have, and they complain all the time. They complain all the time about wanting new markets, about wanting better prices, about wanting this, wanting that. And an interesting thing in New York State with mid to large scale farmers, which are the ones we're talking about here, so 200, 300, 400 acre farms are the ones that we targeted for this work with C.H. Robinson. One of the interesting things that's happened over the last couple years as the whole local food trend has really exploded is that these guys are all very, very, very busy and very successful selling their food into local supermarkets, regional supermarkets in New York State when the product is in season. But the other thing that happens is that they have excess supply. So Emily's going to talk a little bit about the strategy that we used this summer and some of the little nuances behind the statement that I just made. Emily.
Hi, Karen. Please feel free to chime in. So I took 2 trips upstate this summer with our partner at C.H. Robinson. And the goal was to go up. We went once in the beginning of the season to kind of go up and have one-on-one meetings with farmers. Our partner at C.H. Robinson has been working closely in New Jersey, but he just wasn't familiar with the New York State agricultural landscape, with the temperament of the farmers, with the crops that the farmers grow well, and the crops that have been kind of in series of tests to see if they could possibly grow them well. And so we just went up and we had a lot of meetings and kind of had a lot of going to people's farms and hearing right from the farmers. So part of that is a trust-building exercise. Part of that is a exercise in pacing, teaching someone whose expertise is in moving produce in sales to kind of have a ability to speak with the farmer at the pace which is appropriate for the farmer and kind of with an appreciation for what goes into their products. And especially on our second trip up, which was as the season was really coming to coming to a head, and farmers were realizing that because of our particular weather patterns this year, that there was a lot of product and a lot of product that came on early and came on really strong. And so farmers that have had dependable local retailers in to sell those products were saying, hey, you know, the prices are low, I have too much product. And that's when we could, one way that we realized our partnership with C.H. Robinson could really benefit the farmers is saying, hey, this is great that you have product to meet the regional need, and we have a partner who has an expertise in logistics who can get that product down the coast, down the eastern seaboard, to folks who the season has passed. And that became a place where C.H. Robinson could meet their need. We could keep product in the region and also have benefit to the farmers. So that's kind of something that we started discussing on those trips. And because we were there during the peak of the season having those conversations, it became really real to both the folks at C.H. Robinson and to the farmers that was a real possibility.
In addition to focusing on their long-term goals, one of the things that we do with our clients is really kind of slow them down a little bit and get them to really understand that they are dealing with people. In this case, they knew they're dealing with people. They're salespeople. They're adept people at sales. But you needed to slow down a little bit to meet the tempo and the pace and the expectation of the farmers. And it was one of the reasons why we were asked to do this project is because we had spent so many years with farmers in upstate New York trying to inspire them, encourage them, listen to them, empathize with what is the issue, what are the log jams in getting your product into the marketplace. So one of the things, I'll just kind of share the results a little bit of this year, and then I'll tell you one of the biggest insights that we had about this local sourcing initiative for C.H. Robinson in New York State this year. The results is essentially that we established some very strong, just a few, but some very strong relationships with farmers for C.H. Robinson to build their regional supply chain. We were able to get regionally grown, meaning New York State grown, asparagus, peas, and hard squash sold through C.H. Robinson to large-scale retailers. These are products that hadn't previously made it before into these particular marketplaces. One of the things that we're going to be doing next month is having the first one we're going to do next month, and we'll do another one in January, is to convene the farmers that were participants or near participants, because we had a lot of near sales this year that didn't happen. We're going to get together to talk about why those sales, why the ones that happened, why the ones that didn't happen, and what about next year? How should we develop a strategy now that there is this community amongst a group of farmers and C.H. Robinson and an aggregator up in the area? Now that we have some of the key infrastructure pieces in place, what can we plan now in December for next year and to do it better? One of the things I wanted to mention, in addition to the fact that now there is a new demand for fruit among one of C.H. Robinson's customers. So part of our 2011 strategy is going to be going further west in New York State to go back to some of the fruit farmers that we had worked with for New York City school work and really understand where there is potential to keep local fruit within the state. But one of the things I was going to mention as a very, very, very important idea of a strategy for next year is to build on the core of what C.H. Robinson does really well in the season. What they do really well in the season is have a very, for this group, it might seem a very long regional supply chain for a particular product, let's say corn. One of the things that we learned from the farmers in New York State as the local food trend was growing is, we're shipping all our stuff into supermarkets and it's doing really well, but you know what, we still have 20% of our product that's not getting to a market. How can, there's so much demand, the supply elevated, but the supply is already is all available and ready at the same time, literally within the same 3 to 4 weeks. So a company like C.H. Robinson can take that and work with the farmers to create a longer, a wider distribution range for their product at the same time that they're developing and executing a local food strategy for farmers to sell their products into, let's say, a Walmart distribution center in New York State. That product is ready when it's ready. Even Walmart won't be able to buy it all. Where else in the region can C.H. Robinson ship it where the supply may have already started to peter out a bit because the season is over? So corn is a good example. Corn is a strength of C.H. Robinson. They have customers all over the country that purchase corn. What if we take the corn that's available in New York State and when it's really ready and when it's really great and just ship it a little bit further south, some of the supply a little bit further south to areas where corn may have already started to expire for the season. So we call it excuse me, internally a regional extension strategy. And that we expect that to work very well for the farmers because it will take supply that they can't get to the marketplace through C.H. Robinson or others and have a new market for it. And together that we think that makes a very viable local food strategy. The next, we're going to just move along. I'm noticing the clock. The next project I want to talk about is the New York City Green Cart project. This project is an initiative of the New York City Department of Health. There are 1,000 available permits for individual entrepreneurs to sell fruits and vegetables in low-income communities. So for the part of the Good Food Network that focuses on access to low-income communities of good, healthy food, the New York City Green Cart project is a very interesting model. This model does not focus on local food, but we're going to tell you a little bit about how it works and why it is in the family of infrastructure, the family of this conversation we're having about infrastructure. So the next slide, please. The existing infrastructure that New York City Green Carts uses is a very strong culture of street vending in New York City. Strong history, strong culture of street vending. We have a built-in permitting and inspection process through the New York City Department of Health. We have companies in the city that build carts. We have lots of produce wholesaling and produce distribution businesses and sectors. So we've got really everything you need to have a push cart business in New York City. We've got right here. Most importantly, the policy and the legislation and the permitting process, which a lot of cities do not have. Cities that are interested in replicating a green cart model don't have these kinds of policies and procedures embedded in their government. What infrastructure are we missing? Well, right away we learned that the need for fruits and vegetables in low-income communities is because there isn't fruit and vegetables in those communities, which means there isn't existing street vending businesses selling fruits and vegetables in those communities, which means that there's no place for these people to put their carts. So New York City has lots of places for street vendors to put their carts, but they're all near the sort of midtown, highly populated, more gentrified areas of New York City that have the most vibrant street cart culture. So one of the things we've had to build and work on, and it's going very slowly, I got to tell you, we just finished our 3rd season of supporting the Green Cart Project. We are barely making a dent in establishing new cart storage facilities, which are called commissaries. Another missing infrastructure is very, very small-scale produce distribution businesses. Although there are hundreds of them in New York City, they are not necessarily oriented to making street-side deliveries to fruit and vegetable carts, and not street-side deliveries to fruit and vegetable carts in the areas where green carts exist. So one of the things we are identifying are high-functioning green cart vendors who have a truck, to support them to understand how they could start a small-scale distribution business to sell to their own carts as well as to other carts around the city. One of the things we have, and it is a little bit precarious, is an accessible government liaison. We have contact with the health department, but when the support, the excuse me, foundation support for this project goes away, that connection between the work that we do supporting the vendors and the New York City Department of Health will likely go away, and that will be a piece of infrastructure we're going to try to get built through some other community-based organization over the course of the next year. So the next slide, what are some of our strategies? You know, the project was really built on the notion of if you build it, they will come. If you put fresh fruits and vegetables in low-income communities, people will buy it. And our job is to focus exclusively, well, not exclusively, but for the most part, to focus on the vendors. What do the vendors need? Our job is not to focus as much on building demand, but on building up the infrastructure for the supply. So in terms of building it and they will come, you can't just put a street cart in the middle of any community that has lousy produce on it and expect people to buy it. Just because there isn't a high quantity of fresh fruits and vegetables in these communities doesn't mean that the communities are going to tolerate low quality of fresh fruits and vegetables. So one of the things that we focus most strongly on is making sure they have good quality produce on the carts. The other part of our strategy is that we are adding social value to an existing business model. So there are street carts all over New York City, and about 400 of them sell produce. But now there are 475 more carts selling produce in low-income communities that have to bring an extra message with them, and that extra message has to do with combating the effects of diet-related illnesses and increasing access and food stamp usage, et cetera. The other thing that we do is we provide business support services and help the vendors navigate through the bureaucracy, which is, as John alluded to, big and ugly in New York City. If you are an independent small business person who doesn't speak English and you want to try to avail yourself of an entrepreneurship opportunity with the City of New York, the good side is there's lots of opportunities. The bad is so difficult to work your way through the process. It's just very, very cumbersome and not very friendly. The other piece of infrastructure, excuse me, we're building for is community support through community-based organizations that are functioning in these communities, such as soup kitchens, food pantries, economic development groups, job training groups, et cetera, to adopt green carts, so to speak, to build up a reliable customer base and also provide some other community service support to the vendors themselves. So it's another piece. It's a little bit unusual in some of the in that it doesn't deal directly with agriculture, but one of the things I'm proud to say is that we were able to organize a promotion on the green carts this fall with the New York Apple Association, where we were able to get green cart vendors discounts on New York State and provided them bilingual marketing materials to support the sale of those products on the green carts. And we hope to do that with more local product next year. So the next slide, we're going to go to the third case study for tonight. We're going to talk about the results of, oh yeah, let's go for, sorry Emily, this is funny because we weren't planning on forwarding each other's slides. I want to go to the third case study, which actually is the first in terms of the chronology of these three. And I want to have this opportunity to bring in Shana Cohen to the conference Carp Resources at the time, and she was really my sergeant at arms in helping us understand big, bulky infrastructure, which is New York City school food. And how are we going to get a local procurement program up and running in this organization? So I'm going to just give you a little bit of the background. It's New York City, and then Shana will, I'd like Shana to contribute a little bit to how we designed our strategy and why we think it was a good strategy to have. As you see on this slide, New York City has serves about 860,000 meals a day in about 1,500 schools. There are 1.2 million children in the school system. The local procurement initiative grew out of something called the School Food Plus initiative, which had three core purposes, as you see there on the screen. And, and for the local procurement piece, it was very important to identify manufacturers in the region and to work with the school food, what they call the Department of Technology, to orient their specifications to local supply. So the next slide, please. So Shana, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the infrastructure that we with the local procurement program, and also how we designed and took our approach.
Great. Essentially what we found, we started off by kind of digging deep into school foods procurement program, what they use, how they get their food, how they use it, how they prepare it, just basically how it works, and where it goes to. And what we found is that they work with 4 distributors who are contracted at the beginning of the year, and those distributors divide up the boroughs of New York City and provide all of the cafeterias. So in order to get into school food, we had to get into the distributors. And those distributors, you know, their contracts and other stuff, they are a slim margin business themselves. So encouraging them to find new products and new suppliers that they weren't used to try new relationships with people who were going to work out, this was a big risk for them. And that was a big part of our work, was vetting suppliers, good matches for these distributors and for the school food system that they were supplying. So our strategy was to always work within school food's budget for additional grant money or any other kind of money that would be spent on food. And essentially we sort of tried to work 2 ways. We looked at everything that the school in terms of food. We tried to figure out what of those foods either is or could be produced within our region. And then we took a 2-prong approach, which was to try to replace foods they already buy with basically the same product but grown locally from a local supplier, and also to try to introduce new products where new products were needed or desired. And that was essentially how we approached it. Do you want to add anything to that, Karen?
Nope, that was great. I'm minding the clock, and we're at 4:20. I just wanted to make sure that we can at least get through the presentation and hopefully take a couple questions.
Sure. Do you want me to talk about a specific example?
I think generally, I'd like you. Why don't you talk about the carrot story, because that seems to be the story that resonates with.
The carrots, in searching out new suppliers, we found a carrot grower who was both of the right size to supply the food. He was in our region. He's in New York State, and he also was just very, very motivated to serve New York City schools and to improve school food and product, carrots being one of his dominant products at his farm, into the system. And so we looked at what they use, and we found, oh, well, they use a ton of these little carrot snack packs for all different kinds of things across the school food system. We thought, well, why can't we do something like that for New York? So we did a test run with the kinds of carrots that this farmer and a couple of others in his area grow, astonishing amounts of waste and relatively low quality when we tried to make those carrots into those little torpedo snack packs over the place. It didn't really work, and it turned out that it didn't work because of the kind of variety that was being grown. So what we were able to do was to work with this farmer to work with a supplier who was very motivated and excited to get a new variety out, a variety that would work much better for this kind of processing. We got school food there and helped encourage communication between them and their food tech department, all of the suppliers, everyone together at the table to talk about what would be needed to make this new product happen. A trial planting was done, the carrots were brought in, the processing happened, and a snack pack was developed essentially by identifying infrastructure that exists a company that had been doing apple slices for school food was used to do some of the initial runs of the carrots. Working with a farmer who was interested in finding a variety that would work. In this case, the most interesting part was finding a product that existed here, and we could do something similar, but something somewhat similar that really met the needs of our region's growers and our region's buyers, and to create something new with that.
Great. So let's go to the next slide. And so I want to just kind of give you a little bit of an overview of what we were able to accomplish in about 2.5 years. We didn't do it all alone. We were working with brokers of manufactured products that had been working with school food for many, many, many years, and were already on to some local food items that they didn't know why they didn't know that the local food thing was important to do, but they were already working with an upstate dairy cooperative on a yogurt project. But we were able to identify and touch, so to speak, about $5 million worth of regional foods that got into the city school system in about 2.5 years. Now, that's a lot. It's a very small percentage of New York City's budget, but it is still significant in demonstrating a question that still is being asked, which is, we can't even think about local food because it costs more. And I just want everybody on this call to understand that we had no budget, we had no excuse me, no subsidy. The only thing we had was our mindset to try to simply replace products that the schools were currently buying with local products. So one of the things that we feel pretty proud of, that because we could prove this, that it was possible, even on a small scale relative to their entire budget, in a place like New York City, that proof was used to support specification legislation that came out of the 2008 Farm Bill. And I guess ironically, New York City had the opportunity to leverage that legislation and create a local procurement policy, although they are actually moving forward to it more quickly than I thought. One of the things that they are, which is partially a result of our saying, listen, when we got plums available in New York City, Shana, do you remember the plums?
Very much so.
When we have plums in New York City, in New York State, they are a particular kind of plum. They're beautiful Italian kind of plums. They're much smaller than the plums that come from California. They're really good. They're really available in the market for them. But guess what? You need 2 of those to meet the USDA spec.
Sometimes 3.
Sometimes 3 to meet the USDA spec for a school by the USDA. So we had somebody who we called our local hero inside the city school system, who himself on and off to this project. But what he was able to do was to create some seasonal specifications for certain items that, no matter what, they were going to come in different form. They were going to be grown in different form. They were going to be a different variety. They were going to end up being a different kind of product. But they were at a relative price point. So the schools now are actually taking a list of, I think, about 10 items and creating seasonal turn-on, turn-off specifications for them, so that they can still have a national supply available to them, and in their mainstream system when the local supply is not available or too pricey. Probably one of the things I feel most proud of is that there are farmers in the region who still keep calling us and saying, are you still doing that work with New York City schools? Because we actually love selling into that market. People, particularly farmers, who had doubts about the sustainability of a local procurement strategy, or whether it was just a whim. A lot of producers came to us, local food thing, but is it really going to last? And so we continue a little just information services to the schools, because we're not officially working with them now. But there is an ongoing interest in regional agriculture, and the executive chef of New York City schools has identified excuse me, a local supply of grass-fed beef that he was able to create an approved specification to the USDA, which is a very, very big deal, not only because if the meat can be purchased, and it's quite pricey compared to the meat that they get through the commodity system, but if the meat it shows many things. It shows a new market for New York State beef producers, and we have a small beef industry, but a growing grass-fed beef industry. The other thing it really shows inside the organization, which is the executive chef of School Food, who wasn't the most friendly to the local procurement strategy the whole time we were working on it, actually on his own made this whole thing happen. And his passion around it, I just spoke to him about this a week ago, his passion is driven by the passion for the farmer and the farm conditions in upstate New York. So in terms of infrastructure, we needed the distributors who were already purchasing the food. Without them, they're the linchpin. Without them, we would have had absolutely no joy in this local procurement work at all. But the other linchpin was really having the leadership and appreciation and the drive instigated from within the organization, a very big, bulky organization with 8,000 employees. It's a piece of infrastructure in and of itself, just the human resources infrastructure at School Food. And for somebody to get inspired and take a leadership approach and take initiative for something that he doesn't have to do because his job is already very big, and push it through and get a specification approved by the USDA is really moving the system forward. So I feel very, very proud to be associated with the folks at School Food and how they have taken things on in the way that they can take things on. So let's just head to wrap up here about summarizing what approach is. We were told we could stay on a little bit longer if people do have some questions. I know we haven't been able to answer a lot of the questions that have come in. I'll try to find a way to do that so that you can hear them. But let's just kind of summarize our infrastructure approach. So we really believe it's really important to know the problem you're trying to solve. Come to us and they say, this is the problem. We want more local food in the school. But that's not the problem they're trying to solve. The problem they're trying to solve is the infrastructure with which and by which the local foods need to find their way into the system. And in the case of the wholesale farmers market, the problem that we were trying to solve 6 years ago may be a very different problem now. We might not need a physical marketplace, or we might need a physical marketplace. A lot of things have happened in the past 6 years. Our approach is always first to sort of say, what is existing? I kind of take the stand. I don't believe that assets don't exist. I believe there are assets that are utilized, misinformed, avoided, or whatever. I'm not always right about that, but our approach is to identify assets or resources that exist first before trying to recreate the wheel. The third thing that we do is that we widen the stakeholder group. We never believe that the people who come to us are a robust and diverse enough group to approach or solve their problems. So part of what the value that we bring is by suggesting, sometimes insisting, that they speak to people or types of groups that they wouldn't normally speak with, excuse me, and try to make a connection between them. The fourth thing we do is we kind of slow the thing. We try our best to slow the process down, and with some clients it's extremely difficult to do that. They're on a tight time frame. They have a goal. They've thought about it for 5 years, but they haven't talked about it for 4, and now they have 1 year to reach their goal. But the most important thing is to build trust among the key players in the system, whether it be between farmers and distributors, whether it be between market vendors and market management, whoever it is, the trust is the key, and you can't speed date through trust building. We have absolutely learned that over and over again. The next thing in terms of our approach is that because we are a business consultancy, we focus first on building the financial case for what we're trying to do. We build it strongly, we build it clearly, and then we find the ways to bring the social values into the business model, into the project, into the objective. So we kind of start with the financial first and go into the other 2 legs of the stool. We also look to a range of government agencies and departments for coordination and shared resources. And I think we're doing this a little bit more because our integrated and a part of government offices, especially here in New York City. But one of the things we've learned is that just because they're government agencies working on the same thing, it doesn't mean they're talking to one another. And it doesn't mean that they're utilizing their internal resources in a way that is collaborative and supportive of the end goal. So that's the last piece of our approach that is probably the newest piece of our approach is within a single sector of government, sort of unleashing some of the barriers between the different departments or the different sectors or the different rungs in those groups. And then the next slide, I think, is just our Q&A slide. Thanks, Emily. Yep, that's it. So that is the end of our presentation, and thanks to everybody for putting up with the technology problems we had in the beginning with my sound. I'm sorry to that out, and if anybody cares to stay and ask some questions, I'm happy to stay for another 15 minutes or so.
Great, thanks. Got through those technology problems and had a good chunk of information there. So yeah, let's move into questions. There's a long list here, and I've kind of gone through and I'll pull out some. We clearly don't, but let me start with this one. And
okay.
I think we're going to hear from Karen, Emily, and Sean, and you guys can kind of sort out who the best.
Okay.
So at one point you mentioned, there's a question that says, you mentioned finding log jams between the farmers and C.H. Robinson. So maybe talk a little bit about what are some of those log jams. Maybe comment, do you see those in other areas? Are these the kind of things that are commonplace?
Well, log jams exist everywhere along the system. In this case, the biggest log jam that we faced this year, and I'm not saying that this is the log jam for the project overall or for the future of the project. The biggest log jam we had this year was the kind of broken rhythm of communication. So on one hand, there was all this urgency. We have organic, beautiful blueberries. I think they were in the slide there. We had a picture of them. They're ready to go to market. A sale fell through for the farmer. Can we get them sold through C.H. Robinson to a retail in New York City? And it literally had to be done in like 15 minutes, or those berries were going to, they had to get on a truck and go somewhere. Too quick to use the connections that we had built to really make a deal. It felt a little bit like gambling in a way. It was like on that trip, we were like, what do we do? What can we do? What can we do to get these blueberries were so beautiful and so delicious. And then on the flip side, it also sometimes just took a long time for some communication to take place, like how many acres of corn have you planted? Well, sometimes it took like 2 weeks to get that answer. And it's an easy answer to get, and I think some of why it was slow to get some of that information was because the trust building didn't yet form a speed dial relationship.
And that's something we definitely learned. This is Emily here, traveling with our partner at CH. Folks that he was regularly buying from and selling to, he was having a continual conversation with throughout the day. And kind of, I think what we were trying to do is kind of build that relationship and see what kind of communication and conversation would work best for these farmers, representing these farmers in New York State. So I think one of the log jams is that communication, and each kind of party learning to communicate in a way that works for the other. But again, as Karen said, I don't see that necessarily being a log jam into the future.
Okay, let's stay with the CA study that you provided, because there's a number of questions about that. Another one, and you may have touched on this a little bit, but I want to hit it directly. It's about the aggregator. It says, what kind of aggregator what kind of aggregator was unique in this? Now, maybe that's C.H. Robinson, or maybe there's someone in between the farmers and C.H. Robinson. So tell us about that dynamic.
There are a lot of different players that fit into the picture with a C.H. Robinson model. The one thing, if you ever meet anybody from C.H. Robinson, one of their sound bites is, we are the largest company you've never heard of, because they just don't have a very much of a brand. The thing they'll tell you is that their strategy and their profitability over the last 50 years is built on their non-approach to business, which means they don't own any trucks, they don't own any warehouses, they don't own any facilities whatsoever. Now, there's because they are starting to acquire some smaller produce companies that come along with warehouses or sheds. So even though what C.H. Robinson does is kind of provide the and the network for getting things from A to B. So some of the logjam, to go back to the logjam question, was, could we find the right size truck at the right size of volume, the right volume of product from A to B? They don't own the trucks, they don't own the warehouses. It was all about, picking and choosing the right assets to activate to make the sale happen.
We also worked with there's a co-op that we worked with that had some of the cooling infrastructure that was required by the retailers. So there was the farmers already had a relationship with the co-op and with that cooling infrastructure. So that was kind of taking advantage of some of the other existing regional infrastructure, and then C.H. Robinson having kind of the trucks to help move that and help move it efficiently, to a larger market.
And did C.H. Robinson have those people in the queue, or did you guys have to find them?
Combination of both. Combination of both. They had some, we had some. So our network was able to expand by virtue of being tapped into their network, and obviously their network was expanded by tapping into ours. I mean, one of the reasons they wanted to work with us is because of some of those smaller aggregators, co-ops, brokers that we have strong relationships with in the state that they just simply didn't know.
Okay. Let's take one more on C.H. Robinson, and then we'll move. But this one kind of segues, I think, between this and the other case studies, and it's around price to the grower. So in a situation, what kind of price are they getting for the product? Are these folks also have other markets and selling directly, and does that price compare to those? And then maybe, like I said, segue to the price that some of the growers that are supplying some of the other models that you saw. So let's talk about price in general to the growers.
Okay. So the first part of the question is, what kind of price does C.H. Robinson pay the growers?
Yeah, I think that's a good starting spot.
They have a couple of different purchasing models. One is that they contract growers at the beginning of the season for either all or part of their acreage or all or part of their crops. That was not the case with our work in New York State last year because it was year one, but it is one model that we may move to for year two with some of the growers that are already kind of in the family. The second model is they pay them the market price. They call the farmers up and they say, listen, I can move 4 tractor trailer loads of your corn today. This is the price. Do you want to do it? Now, what's the piece of information that's critical in my answer just there is 4 tractor trailer loads. And it's critical for a farmer that has 4 tractor trailer loads and would be able to have one call to sell those 4 loads rather than 10 calls to 10 different kind of aggregators. The reverse of that question, the reverse of that is also true, like because they ship tractor trailer loads largely, tractor trailer loads, sometimes it's a call that needs to go to yet another person to coordinate that supply. But Emily has a part of the answer as well.
One of the things that I was impressed by working with the folks in C.H. Robinson is when we would have a conversation with a farmer, he would say, what kind of prices were you getting for this last year, this particular product? What kind of prices would you ideally want to get for it this year? What kind of price, I mean, what do you plan on kind of that you need to make on this year? So he would kind of get an idea of the farmer's low and the farmer's ideal and kind of bring that understanding, kind of having that conversation with the farmer and I think genuinely trying to work within that. And part of the other story is that because C.H. Robinson brings such scale that they are moving so many things within their business that they're still going to be paying a market price to the farmer, but kind of that scale gives them the ability to, their livelihood isn't based on as much as that one particular farmer. They're not so small. Their scale is kind of part of what's helping their business be successful and helps them deliver a price to the farmer.
Shana, I wanted to weigh in on that question for school food also. Although following what Karen said about, it's product, but the price for the product at that time that becomes an issue for farmers. And in school food, especially when we started dealing with fruit, we found that it wasn't necessarily, for some farmers this season, for some times with their products, they would find that what school food could pay was not an acceptable price for them. But one of the times when we found that it worked really well, match between fruit growers and school food on small fruit. Farmers have a very hard time finding markets for small fruit. Retailers don't necessarily want them. They kind of veer towards the bigger, more gigantic fruit. And school food wants a small fruit. They want it to be as close to the size of a USDA serving size and also an amount that a child can eat without throwing it away. So farmers were very excited to have any market, and the price that school food could pay was an attractive price to them at that time. So that was just an example of how that pricing can work.
Great. Here's another question, and I know you touched on this a little bit, but it's around processing. And so a lot of times farmers will have too much product or too much at the same time, and I think you mentioned that. So especially around rural areas where you're going to have this kind of production, what are you folks finding out about enabling some kind of minimal processing that can then later be distributed into various markets? What do we know about that? I'm thinking about freezing or I guess maybe canning.
I'm not sure. What do you mean? Where can we find out more about that? I'm not sure.
No, what experiences have you had doing that with these particular markets?
Yeah. We have great experience in understanding the demand for those products. Probably the two best examples of our experience with, let's just call them value-added products, or three. We already told you the carrot story, but the two other stories which really become part of this are when we were doing the local procurement work for New York City schools, identified that they purchase a whole lot of frozen vegetables. And they purchase a whole lot of frozen vegetables because of the varying of cooking equipment in the schools, but they purchase a whole lot of frozen vegetables because there's a minimum number in the local food mindset. There's a minimum number of vegetables that can be fresh during the year and served into schools, et cetera, even if they were buying local food. What we also had in New York State was a really robust frozen food processing infrastructure. We had Bird's Eye Foods in upstate New York, a century-old company that was partially owned by a co-op that grew the vegetables, and there was a process to monitor the quality and make sure that all the vegetables coming in met the standards of the processing plant, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that we did in months to make this work was to create a Pride of New York brand of frozen vegetables. It was a bunch of different products that were packaged and additional food service packaging to be able to be shipped and distributed into New York City schools. And we did that without any contractual relation to the schools and Bird's Eye. And that was the piece of infrastructure that we really needed, was a contract. It was very easy to get Bird's Eye to agree to pack the stuff. They pack frozen vegetables all the time. It was no big deal to put a Pride of New York sticker on it because the products were coming from New York State. The mechanism that was difficult was the distributors' contracts and getting the distributor their supply. The second example we have of that is what we focused on in our third year of the local procurement work with New York City schools, which was a business plan for a frozen sliced peach manufacturing facility. And we love this peach project more than anything, and we would love it even more if it would get built. But what we identified over the couple of years leading up to that third year, one of the most desired products by school food are frozen peaches. And they desire them. They can be packed with, just water or juice. They didn't have to be packed in sugar. If they're frozen, not canned, they had a little bit more of a nutrition profile. The USDA supply system, they were shipments coming out of California into the USDA commodity supply, right into schools, very little or low cost to the school. And they liked them because they were frozen and they could defrost them and use them when they needed them. And they could use them on salad bars, they could use them for picnics, they could use them in the winter. It was really just a win-win for the schools. But the problem is that the supply dried up. So all those peaches were not available through the USDA system. So for 2 years we didn't hear anything about these peaches because they were getting them. Then when they stopped getting them, that's all we could hear. Peaches, peaches, peaches. Well, guess what? We actually produce a lot of peaches in New York State. And we also have a peach problem in New York State. The companies that the peach growers were sending their peaches to be processed for sending them to be pitted, sliced, and frozen, 50%, one of the two main facilities, which was just over the border in Canada. So we found a huge opportunity for a new frozen peach slicing business in New York State to be formed which we ended up writing a business plan
Yeah.
for. The business plan is still available to be, the opportunity is still available to be taken up on.
Yeah, I'm going to chime in with the existing infrastructure piece, which was that the peach slicing pitting line was available for sale from this company that closed down, but upstate New York also already had a few, one in particular, an individually quick frozen tunnel. So we saw it as a really perfect match. We could, with the slicing and pitting infrastructure, the peaches would be ready to be delivered right into the IQF freezer, which would maintain a very, very high quality product and meeting a lot of the specifications that the schools demand for their use. And that particular IQF tunnel, because of the seasonality of New York State fruit and vegetables, was available during peach processing time. So that was really looking at, we had the fruit, we had the freezer, looking for a way to get the slicing and really get that business booming in New York State. So that's part of the reason why we loved that project so much.
Well, that's great. Thanks for that really informative response. I got one more question. We're getting to the end of our time, so let me ask one more question, and maybe you guys can try to respond rather rapidly so that we can wrap up after that. And so we'll shift gears towards the green carts, and the question is, what types of community organizations were you most successful with when partnering with them with the green carts?
That's a great question, John. And actually,
Yeah.
there is actually a long answer, but I'll be as brief as possible.
I appreciate that.
I'm sorry. The community-based organizations that are the highest functioning partners, so to speak, for green carts are hospitals. Not all hospitals, but hospitals that have a particular focus on increasing the nutrition and healthy living of both their patients and their employees. So we have a partnership with Montefiore Hospital, which has 6 clinics in the Bronx, and they've adopted green carts, literally created a map and supported the businesses of green carts, about 8 green carts in a 6-square block area in one particular area of the Bronx, by sending customers to the green carts, writing prescriptions for fruits and vegetables and sending their patients to them when they release them from the clinics. Another very successful community partnership is with a group called Vámonos Unidos, which is an immigration social justice organization that supports the sort of acclimation of new immigrants into New York City through entrepreneurship support, legal support, and advocacy. And as the street vendor community in New York City is probably 90% made up of immigrants and very early stage immigrants, they've been a very, very good partner to us because they kind of function on the street, and they have very good relationships themselves with legal support groups and advocacy organizations and entrepreneurship support groups. So they do what we do, and now we're linking our services to theirs. So they're another really good example.
Thanks so much. That was excellent. I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff to take us into home base here, but let me just thank you all for your attention and great questions, and thanks to our presenters for the information they've shared with us. So Jeff, take it away.
Yeah, let me second that, thanks, and I'm really going to try to burn through this. So I just want to let you know that the NGFN webinars are the third Thursday of each month, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The next webinar features a look at the financial side of things. Over the last 20 years, credit scoring systems have made it easier for banks to analyze risk and make loans to diverse worlds of small business, from car dealerships to coffee shops. Now, a group of sustainable agriculture leaders are working on a similar tool to help banks with the new paradigm-shifting generation of small, diverse food and farm entrepreneurs. To learn about the Financing Farming in the U.S. project and how you can participate, help more lenders get to yes with credit-worthy farms. January, the Yellowwood Associates team will share with you how to do effective strategic planning. They've developed a comprehensive system for finding the right place to put limited resources to make true systemic change. Their techniques have been refined for years, and I have personal experience with just a small part of it, and I was floored by how it cuts through all the chaff to truly focus a project. To register for either one of these webinars, go to ngfn.org/webinars. Again, we have a growing archive of all the past webinars, recordings, slides, written questions and answers, and other resources. Same URL, ngfn.org/webinars. So take some professional development time and watch one or two that you might have missed. Many of you know that the NGFN publishes a monthly. We mentioned this earlier, that Grow NYC is featured in this one. Also in the November, has begun a cooperative agreement with the USDA to understand and support food hubs, local regional aggregation facilities. First, tell us that they're working in public spaces is trying to identify all the food hubs in existence in the U.S. Or those. So if you are a part of a food hub, let us know. There's a link on ngfn.org homepage, but you can also go to bit.ly/myfoodhub. There's a short series of questions, so we just know who you are. If you know someone else involved in a food hub, please let them know about this questionnaire. You can find the NGFN on YouTube, Twitter, and ngfn.org. And I'd like to encourage you to add your name, interests, your bio, other information to our growing database of people, organizations, and funders. This increases your ability to connect to people within your region and across regions. And if you haven't already, sign up for our email updates. There's a link on the ngfn.org homepage. Feel free to contact us at any time, contact@ngfn.org. And I do want to encourage you to fill out the survey that will appear on your screen momentarily. Thank you to all our presenters, and thank you for sticking it out for a little extra time.
Great. Well, thank you, Jeff and John and Marty and everybody for hanging in there. It was really fun.
Excellent. All right.
Good.
Till next month. Bye.
Okay. Take care, everyone.